it's part of an oral tradition, right? In poetry, you can read a poem, of course, in a book, but even if you were to read this poem, it wouldn't be the same, would it? Because it's actually uh, hearing the words and hearing how she pronounces them that makes a difference. Um, Also, what her delivery is like, right? Because it's like a performance, like a play, right? So that's why it's important to be able to watch it rather than to read it, which you can do at the same time, right? You can read it while you're watching it, and maybe you need to, because of the speed at which she delivers it, and maybe also because that there's some bits that you just don't understand, right? You mentioned, Sophia, her ways of talking, that she also refers to as her three languages, right? She says she's trilingual. What do you think about that? Is she trilingual? Do people consider her trilingual? Is it fair that she should call herself
Well,
bilingual? Yeah, go on.
people don't, but I think she's right.
Uh-huh. Why? Why don't they? Why do you think she's right?
Because she's speaking three different languages and she's communicating through them, and people are speaking those languages.
Uh-huh.
I mean, there is people in the world speaking those dialects or those accents, so they should be valid,
Mm-hmm.
all of them.
Well,
What if people are using them?
mm-hmm.
If people,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay, absolutely. You mentioned a couple of words or a few words that are important here. You say she is communicating. Yes, this definitely she is communicating. We communicate in a lot of ways. I was just saying that it's important that we see her, not just read, to be able to get the full meaning of what she's saying. But you also mentioned words like language, dialect, and accent, right? Um, and we also mentioned the fact that sometimes we don't necessarily understand everything she says, right? Because we she says it in such a way so that even if we don't speak those uh, languages or those dialects or those accents, we are able to get some idea, right? She's trying to communicate an idea beyond the words that she uses, right? Um, and in some cases, she's using those words to communicate that idea without communicating that idea explicitly. So, for example, what you just said, Carolina, all those forms exist, and they should be respected. They should be considered, right? Um, that's another important issue. Um, it's difficult to write and speak at the same time and make sure that I write properly in a space that is very small that I can barely see sometimes. So give me a second to make sure that I am writing this properly.
And of course, this is something that happens not only in English, but also in Spanish or in any other languages. The same happens
Absolutely.
here because it depends on the context and the people we are talking to.
Absolutely. So this is the word that I wanted to put in: intelligibility, and furthermore, mutual intelligibility. That's even a further point, right? This has to do with understanding, with actually comprehending the other form. As you said, was it Macarena who was saying this?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Absolutely. It happens with all languages, and it happens uh, within what we may call one language, right? Because she says she's trilingual. We could be saying, oh, but she's speaking English all the time, but she's speaking different varieties of English. Now, I mentioned above this question of language versus dialect. Have you ever heard the expression, a language is a dialect with an army and a navy? You ever come across that expression? A language is a dialect with an army and a navy. What do you think that means? That conveys an idea, right? What language do you speak as a first language?
Spanish, but it's not really Spanish. What is it?
What's that? What is it? It's not really
Español
Spanish. What is
criollo.
it?
I don't remember what it's called. Lunfardo. We speak that. We don't speak one Spanish. Exactly. Thank you.
Aha. You mentioned Lunfardo. You mentioned Rio Platense. You can actually say that when you say River Plate Spanish. In English. Sorry to those Boca supporters here. But for example, you say Rio Platense, right? Now, do you say tú sos? No. Do people in Uruguay say tú sos?
Yes, they do.
So it's a different variety, but it's River Plate Spanish because they're on the River Plate just like we are.
Yes.
So?
You're right.
No, I don't want to be right. I'm just giving you examples that challenge what is being said here. Also, do you speak español? Ay, lo escribí mal, ¿no ven? Español o castellano.
Castellano, yes, well.
No sé, ustedes digan, qué sé yo, ni idea.
We speak porteño, perhaps.
Ajá, porteño. Pero porteño, the people from Valparaíso, you know Valparaíso?
In Chile, yes.
Chile, they call themselves porteños as well. Unos caraduras. Unos caraduras. Están en el puerto, pero porteños. Y nosotros somos los únicos porteños, o nos creemos los únicos porteños, ¿no? Pero ellos se llaman porteños a sí mismos también. Entonces también hablan español porteño, qué sé yo. No sé. Yes, go ahead.
No, with that criteria, people from Castilla, I think, speak Castellano, right? So we don't speak Castellano either.
Get it. Right. They speak Castilian, in fact. Castilian, which is definitely different from the way we speak, right? So, strange, isn't it?
And if we move to a smaller community, people from Belgrano doesn't speak the same way as people from Lugano.
That's correct.
So books could be reduced.
Lawyers don't speak the same way as pizza makers.
Yes.
Right? And I don't know, surgeons don't speak the same way as architects. Now, we go back to this question of mutual intelligibility and whether we can understand each other or not, and to what extent we can understand each other or not, right? We're not going to answer this question here and now. I mean, it's a big question, but it's something that I want you to start thinking about, okay? Because it's to do with understanding what is a language. It's to do with understanding how much of a language do we need to understand to be able to say we speak a language. Because you're on a path to improving your English to the point of speaking it perfectly. But then the question is, what is perfectly? And which of the three ways that Jamila speaks do you want to speak? And will you ever be able to speak, to understand everything that somebody says in English? I don't know, just asking, throwing these ideas out there. Carolina.
But I don't think we will ever be able to finish, knowing everything about the language, because like pure. There is no pure English or Spanish or, I mean, esto que dice acá, esta expresión es language, it's, I mean, cada idioma es un lenguaje diferente. There is no one English, no one Spanish, so how will we be able to learn? I mean, like they are different languages themselves. No sé si me estoy explicando lo... Because I'm still thinking.
I know. That's what I want you to do. And as I said, I don't want you to come up with one answer now because it's a complex issue. I want you to be aware of this issue, that this issue exists. First of all, there's this perception of the completeness of learning, right? If you were to read a page of the dictionary every day, right, and memorize it, let's imagine you have perfect memory, right? So you get up every day, you read a page of the dictionary. At some point, you'll finish the dictionary. You'll finish reading it. Even if you remember the meaning of every word in the dictionary, does that mean that you've completely learned the language? Well, for one thing, the dictionary has probably changed by the time you finish reading it. The language certainly has, right? But beyond that, no dictionary contains every aspect of the language. Knowing words is not enough to know a language. There's more that we need to know a language, okay? And this idea also of the purity of a language, you know, which variety, which form of the language, how do we switch from these different languages from these different varieties that we speak, like Jamila switches between varieties, right? Are we aware of doing it? Are we aware of changing these different forms? Does it have to do with register? Is it to do with more or less level of formality, a greater or a smaller level of formality? Okay, all these are issues to take into account. Okay, an important word that was mentioned that when we discuss these things and when we discuss other things is the word criterion. The word criterion is a word of Latin origin. So the singular is criterion and the plural is criteria, right? I know whoever said it said that criteria, right? Which would be a mistake. But this is the kind of mistake that even native speakers make. Okay, because these words are quite problematic. What is the plural of the word? Y lo escribí mal de vuelta, sorry. Cactus.
Cacti, right?
Right, in Latin, because, you know, the ending of S is cactus, cacti, but people do say cactuses. The same happens with octopus. Octopuses, octopi. Nobody says octopi. Octopi is like whom? Right? What is the plural of this? What's this? You see here? This is a mouse, right? What is the plural?
It's mice.
What is it?
Mice.
Mice.
No.
Mice.
No. The plural of this one is mouses. The animal, the plural is mice.
Ah, sorry.
It's okay. You don't have to apologize. You don't have.
Yes, I thought it was the animal.
You thought I had a mouse in my hand? No.
No, yes, it's okay. You're
disgusting,
right.
Gross.
That was true.
Sorry. It's a computer one. I'll give you another tricky example. Oh, it's escaped me. Wait a minute. Mouses, mice. Oh yes. Do you know what this word means? The one I've written in the chat. Mitten. Mitten. Ah, okay.
Was it that kind of glove that has not the fingers separated?
Right. We have a glove has separate fingers, right? Mm-hmm. Mitten is like this. Right? Just a thumb and then, sí, pero La manopla es para cocinar. That's actually an oven glove.
¿Mitón no se le dice? ¿Mitón puede ser?
Creo que
¿Existe
sí.
la palabra?
Creo que hay que buscarla, no importa. Pero
Sí.
la manopla de la cocina es un oven glove, ¿sí? Porque es para... Y aparte la manopla no necesariamente tiene esa forma, porque puede ser planita y se usa para... Bueno, no importa. Pero mitten, is that word singular or plural? What do you think? Mitten. ¿Qué parece?
I guess it's plural because you always wear both of them.
Well, yes, then what is the singular?
Perhaps knit?
You're right. You're guessing okay, but I gave you too many clues. The singular is mit. You're right. But a lot of people, and you will hear people say mittens. Get your mittens. Right? What's happening here? What is being used is the plural form en, which we find in children.
Yes, children.
In mitten, in oxen. ¿Sí? Ahora, es un plural que se usa muy poquito, ¿no es cierto? Porque no, children we know is an issue because kids always have a problem, right? And children say children's, a child, and that one for sure in English native speakers would say child and children. But native speakers make mistakes with mitten because it's a very unusual word, because we don't say it enough, right? How often do we talk about mittens? How often do we talk about oxen, bueyes? ¿No? ¿Cómo es la expresión con los bueyes? Hay una expresión con bueyes. Bueno, no importa. Anyway, so we got into irregular plurals, right? There's a tendency in the language to regularize irregularity. We try to make it regular, and we try to eliminate irregularity. Okay, people still joining us. Just now, some more people joined us. We were talking about the ways to speak English. And we're going to have a quick look at the answers to see. For some reason, this compiled your answers together with some other answers. So I've got the answers over 62 rather than this group, but never mind. So we have the different things that the speaker says and where they belong, in the sense that she talks about her languages belonging in different language domains. This is the technical term to talk about this. We know that we speak differently at home, at work, with our friends, okay? In some cases, people speak completely different languages. If you have un supermercado chino near your home, you know that the people who work there speak one language at home and another language with the customers, right? That's very clear. But even when we don't have that clarity, we have different language domains in which we use different language forms, which is why Jamila is exemplifying in this poem with these different forms. What kind of thing is this? Is the language of the home. Most people got that one right. What's good with you, son? This is with friends or in the streets. Hello, which seems pretty neutral, but now we see it's not that neutral, is something she uses in school, okay? And it kind of makes sense that this is the more neutral form, because this is where people from different backgrounds meet, right? So it's where they come together and they use the form that is less peculiar to their particular contexts, right? You'll be mad going to the store. I can't say it the way she says it. She says it better. It's the way, it's a way of spoken at home. This is the impending problem at hand, right? A lot of alliteration. The impending problem at hand. Notice the length of words. Notice that the level of formality is different. Notice that to us, this is perhaps more transparent because there's more words of Latin origin. Which is why sometimes people who speak Latin-based languages sound a bit bookish in English. Because we know the long, complicated words, not necessarily because we're sophisticated and educated, but because they are the words of Spanish. Yeah? Cool. What's good? That's the street. Of course, it's that particular street, right? It's not every street. It's her street with her friends, right? We're clear about that. What a one. And I included a slide in your slides with a definition of what a one. Okay. This is a word that, let's see, this comes from the Urban Dictionary. Right? Let me, see if I can make it bigger. Here. Just give me a second so you can see it a bit better. Of Jamaican, notice that this, I copied it on purpose because it's got a spelling mistake.
Sorry. Christina, I only see the screen that says quizzes and forms. I don't know if it's just me.
I can see the slides.
I can see what's a one.
Okay.
Yes, me too.
Okay, maybe it's just my device.
Maybe you are looking at the actual...
No, it's just like you're sharing the screen of that. Maybe it just froze and I stayed there. But I was just wondering if it was me or everyone else.
Right. Yeah, I'm moving between... I'm moving between tabs within a window, right? Because I have everything in the same window. But I'm basically looking at your slides, right? From the presentation. What I wanted to show you here is that the Urban Dictionary is a place where you can find these words that, in fact, it looks like a combination of words, right? It looks like several words brought together, like a contraction. Yeah? A contraction, you're familiar with contractions, right? Don't is a contraction. Wanna is a contraction. Yeah? Can't is a contraction. Yeah? I'll is a contraction. It's a phonological process by which we bring several words together. Okay? That's what this looks like as well. What I wanted you to see is that the Urban Dictionary is a good place to go for these types of things because they're very contemporary, but you have to take them with a pinch of salt because sometimes they're not very well written or very clear. In this particular case, notice that there's a spelling mistake. It says of Jamaican English. It should say Jamaican English, right? Of Jamaican English patois derivation, a contraction of the question, what's going on? What a one star, you want to hit up that spot tonight. Okay, what does that mean? What's going on, pal? You want to go to that place tonight, right? Notice how we need to translate it to understand it, okay? Okay. So that's what a one means, but it's not something that is peculiar to her family or to the group of people that she's familiar with, because that's why it's made it into the dictionary, right? Yep. It's well known. Okay, so back here, what a one, and we're done with that question. Okay. Why does Jamila Liska think a professor is inarticulate when he says hello? Because of where they are, okay? So what she's saying is that she's not saying that her professor is ignorant. What she's saying is that her professor can't adapt the way he speaks to the place where they are, which is what she can do. Okay, so articulate in this case means something a little bit different from the definition, the dictionary definition of articulate. It includes being able to adapt and changing the way you speak. She's not saying the professor is not educated, but perhaps he's so educated or too educated to be able to adapt to another variety. Okay. When Jamila Liskett says to her mother, "Mummy, no, that sentence is not following the law. Never does the word mad go before present participle. That's simply the principle of this English." And the answer is that she's being prescriptive, right? Not from a dictionary point of view of prescriptive, but telling the mother what the rules of the language are. Okay, in that sense. When she says, "I feel crazy like I'm cooking in the bathroom," it's because she sometimes mixes up her languages. Does that happen to you sometimes? Yes? Have you ever been kind of confused and gone, "Oh, what am I saying? Is that right?"
Time.
All the time. Does
because
it? Yeah.
I study English at the teacher training course in the morning. In the afternoon, I am a teacher of sixth form, and after 6 o'clock, I teach to first certificate, senior six, teens four. So I realize that sometimes I'm speaking in English to people who I shouldn't be.
Right.
But or this typical thing of, how do I say this? I know how to say it in English. I have no clue how to say it in Spanish because I'm so used to speaking in English. I sort of get lost in how to pronounce. I think I become more fluent in English now than in Spanish, actually.
That's a very good example, Paula. Thank you very much, because you've all spent so much time trying to improve your English, and you think, "Oh, my Spanish is going to stay intact. Nothing's going to happen to my Spanish because it's my first language." But then Paula's example is very good. The time you spend in English, the things you learn, the domains in which you use English grow, and then they start influencing your Spanish. It's not going to go away. I'm sorry to tell you. It never does.
I got this feeling when I started, when I had to do the initiation course here, and I was actually going for the translation
program
to be a translator, and then there was this lengua española, and you had to write a text, and I'm pretty sure I can do an essay in English, I can do a report, I can do an article. I know I cannot do that in Spanish. So I said, okay, yeah, I'm not doing this. That's it. I'm not going to be a translator. I might just accept it. I'm not going to study Spanish any more than this. I want to study English. That's it. Teacher training course it is.
Fair enough. That's an okay decision. But let me tell you, you can write an essay in Spanish. You can.
I know. But I just panic.
You have to learn to do it.
Of course. I just panic at the idea of, not being ready to do that as I was ready to do that in English.
Fair enough. That's a decision. That's a decision, but it is possible, like you learned in English, to learn to do it in Spanish. The thing is, you have to learn to do it, because writing an essay is not something that we're born knowing how to do. We have to learn to do these things. Now, there's this idea, which is actually an ideal of a stable bilingual, somebody who's equally proficient in all domains in two languages. And I wrote ideal in between parentheses because it doesn't exist. It's an ideal in that sense, not because it's what you should aspire to do, but because it's something that can never be attained. And that's all right. That's okay. It makes your learning endeavors realistic, okay? You shouldn't attempt to, like they tell you in women's magazines, Well, now they do. You shouldn't try to be the perfect woman. Well, you shouldn't try to be the stable bilingual. It doesn't exist. Nobody is, okay? People have learned certain things in one language. You have learned phonetics in English, right? You haven't learned phonetics in Spanish. Does that make you less of a speaker of Spanish? No. If you had to, you would go and learn phonetics of Spanish. If you had to. If you don't, you don't. That's it. End of story, okay? So that's also what this poem liberates us from, in a way. Jamila Liskett says, I know that I had to borrow your language because mine was stolen. Is this because, and the answer, she doesn't speak the same language as her ancestors. Okay. And here we're talking about the experience of slavery. Okay. One of that slave owners did in the States in order to prevent rebellions was to mix slaves from different tribes so that they wouldn't understand each other, so that they wouldn't organize a rebellion against their owners, right? But that meant that that's also how these patois grew, because when you throw people together who speak different languages, they invariably communicate. They communicate first in what we know as a pidgin. And then when that pidgin is learned by children growing up, it becomes a Creole. And the interesting thing about this process is that a pidgin is a kind of simple form that incorporates elements of the different languages. Cocoliche. Have you ever heard the word cocoliche?
Yeah.
Yeah. Cocoliche is supposed to be a pidgin that was spoken in this part of the world when there were people who came from different countries and spoke different languages in the conventillos. That's what we associated with. But then Spanish was very dominant, and particularly through schooling. School is a very powerful tool to generate a dominant language, which has positive sides and negative sides, because it also suppresses minority languages. How many of you had great-grandparents who spoke different languages from Spanish? I did. Anybody? What languages? Tell me, if you know. Italian. Okay.
And dialect, because I came from villages.
Exactly, Oriana. I was going to say that. When your great-grandparents or great-great-grandparents came to Argentina, the Italian Republic didn't even exist as a country. So they came from Sicily, from Naples, from Piemonte, from Emilia, wherever they came from, and they spoke the variety of their region. Do you speak Italian, Oriana?
No. Almost nothing. I am a disappointment.
No, you're not a disappointment. It's what happened to most descendants of Italians who assimilated into the majority community and very quickly learned Spanish, and Italian was not passed on in the family, which is a shame. What about you, Lucia? What language did your relatives speak?
Sorry, my mind was not working. English, because they were Irish.
I know. I can tell from your surname. Garrity is an Irish surname. Interestingly, they spoke English and not Irish, right?
Yeah, but no, they spoke English.
I know.
I don't understand a thing of the pronunciation, but
right. So
quite different.
How far back was it in your family?
The grandparents of my grandmother,
right,
and my grandfather, both of them.
Okay, all right. And did they, by any chance, go to Irish schools? Do you know?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
They went to, I don't remember the name, but
St. Bridget,
St. Bridget, yes.
St. Bridget's, okay.
That's it. Yeah.
Okay. I have a part of my family that's Irish, so that's why I know that tradition, right?
Yeah, and the Fahy, I don't know if you know it.
Father Fahy.
Yes.
Because
a place where they go together.
Yes, one of the things that happened was that the Irish immigrants went to farm because they were farmers. So they went to the province of Buenos Aires, and there was a priest who got them to send their kids to boarding schools in Buenos Aires, right? So there were these schools set up in Buenos Aires where the kids came as boarders and where they were educated by nuns who were Irish. And so there they learned, yes, Lucia.
No, yeah, I was about to say that that's exactly what my grandmother did. She was in a farm and she was with Irish people.
Yeah, exactly. So they were in a little island in Argentina, right? And that's why the language was maintained longer. The Italians, on the other hand, were mostly urban because of the jobs they had, because they worked in the city, okay? So you may want to go and find out about your relatives far back and see what happened to the languages, and then maybe we can put together a little language history for the group and see what happened to those languages, because you know, we had a very strong education system that had a lot of successes, that generated a highly literate population in Argentina, but that wasn't so good at maintaining or at fostering languages that people spoke. The other side of my family that was Italian, Oriana, in my case, it was my grandfather, right? So my father could have learned directly from his father, but he didn't. He learned in school, in secondary school. Which was very peculiar, because this was a time when secondary school was not compulsory. Only some people went to secondary school. So most children who were the children of immigrants or immigrants themselves who went to primary schools were told, no, your language has no place here. You have to speak Spanish. Okay.
Well, Cristina, the same happened with our own native languages, no?
Absolutely. Absolutely, Gabriela.
Provinces and aborigines communities, which lost or have lost most of their languages.
Absolutely. Indigenous languages in Argentina have suffered the impact of not only the education system, but of a more general suppression of the Argentine state. Not only in the provinces, but in the cities as well. In the cities, there's something even worse in terms of making these languages invisible. You may have neighbors who speak some of these languages, but they don't want to show that they speak them. And in fact, many people who speak Argentine indigenous languages have constitutional protection with the latest constitution, which doesn't mean too much if you can't do anything about it. But it's even worse. The languages of, for example, if you speak Guarani and you come from Corrientes, your language is constitutionally protected. But if you speak Guarani and you come from Paraguay, your language is not constitutionally protected because it's a foreign indigenous language. Obviously, to the kid who is, 4 or 5 and speaks Guarani at home, it doesn't make any, the kid speaks Guarani, right? And there are issues in schools. I don't know if any of you teach in schools where you've had students who speak these languages at home, because sometimes they don't want even to admit that they speak these languages, or they don't even have words to the name of the words of the languages. They say, oh, that's the way I speak with my grandma. but they don't know the name of the language. They don't know if it's Aymara or Quechua or whatever. Anyway.
Yeah, I saw, I mean, it doesn't particularly have to do with the family, but I saw in social networks that with the pandemic, translators, quant translators particularly, were having problems because, of course, if the doctor doesn't speak native Argentinian languages, and that they were having issues because there was no way that they could have these, that you could go to an appointment with a doctor and you needed a translator.
Absolutely.
And how hard that is, that there weren't enough people that know this language and that can translate it. And the same thing was happening with teachers.
Absolutely.
So I thought it was really interesting, that that's a reality that nobody actually,
very few people are aware of that or do anything about that. And the other similar issues, I was thinking of the doctor's appointments, happened with sign language, with Argentine Sign Language. There's a French film that was on the telly the other day, La Familia Bélier. If you haven't seen it, I recommend it. One of the first things it's a family of deaf people in France with a daughter who's not deaf. And one of the first scenes is the daughter going to the doctors with her parents who have some kind of sexually transmitted disease. And she's 16, 17, and she's having to translate between the doctor and her parents, and having to tell the parents that they have the father in particular that he has to apply a certain cream that he refuses to apply, and she's part of this conversation, and the scene is kind of funny, but the situation is very real. And this happens with children, for example, and at schools as well, Paula, because when the teacher calls the parents in, the child has to be there to translate for the parents sometimes. And the meeting is about the child, but the parents are deaf and the child is the one who's the interpreter. It's very complicated because it's like different worlds. And this takes us back to Jamila. Yes, Paula.
Yeah. We have seen a movie, I think it was I'm not sure if it was in Sujetos or one other subject I saw last year. I saw this film in the classroom, or I don't know, en las aulas. I don't particularly French film.
Yeah,
Entre los muros.
Sí, Entre los muros, claro.
Yeah. And there's this particular scene where there's a kid that is being called in this meeting with with teachers and her mother, and her mother doesn't speak French. So he's he's about to be expelled. And I sort of this particular scene got me like, wow, this really happens.
Absolutely.
Like,
absolutely.
You have no idea what's going to happen to your child, and you're sort of, I don't want to say defenseless, but that you cannot completely express, because she says that the child does his homework, he helps her, but of course it goes beyond that. The decision has already been made, and it's just the kid telling his mother, like, yeah, I'm about to be expelled, like, there's no way out of this. Right. And she's like, okay, we cannot do anything else. And if I was the mother, I wouldn't stop talking, until they realize that this is a huge mistake and he needs to be at school. But yeah, I that particularly shocked me.
This is the case with minorities in any kind of minority, whether it's a racial minority, an ethnic minority, or a linguistic minority in particular. Not having the words to express yourself is a big problem. Anyway, back to Jamila. Lots of interesting things come up. She says that this is a linguistic celebration because she wants people to respect the different ways she speaks. And then, well, we've got some interesting ideas that you wrote here about what the English language is, a multifaceted oration. She's trying to say that English or any other language is always changing, and there are different ways to express ourselves in different situations and groups, depending on the use that people give. Remember, people give, right? That can lead, I'm being prescriptive here, the transformation of a whole language. English language is made up of different roots, so just da, 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 da. Yes, there's the roots, but there's the present of the language as well, right? So we have to be aware that there's different varieties of the language. Okay, let's wrap this up. On some of the topics that we mentioned today, there's this video that, let me just, there. On this particular slide, I included a video that you can watch later on language prejudice and some of the topics that we talked about. This picture takes you to the video, and there's some questions here that you can think about. This is just something to think about, to reflect on some of the things that we're talking about, okay? The next slide includes the activity that we're going to do now, but let me explain before we go to the activity a couple more things. There's this video, which is another one of the Get the Grammar videos, like the one you did, the short videos with the kids and da-da-da-da-da, very simple, with a quiz to go. And there's this podcast. Do any of you listen to podcasts?
Yeah, love them.
You love them? Okay, good, good. This particular podcast is called Lingthusiasm. What do you think it means? Have you ever heard that word? No.
Becoming enthusiastic about linguistics.
Well, there you go. And how do you know it means that? It's an invented word, right?
No, I just split the word. But then I heard the postcard, which I found really difficult, I must say. It was not easy to follow. I mean, one of the women spoke so fast that it was sometimes hard.
Right, absolutely. Gretchen, the lady. So hang on a second. Have I already given you this to listen to?
Yes.
But I didn't tell you had
to. No, you posted it, I think.
Okay.
It was posted.
Yeah. Okay. But I hadn't told you to watch it. Okay, you're ahead of time, Gabriela. That's okay.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. I let me just give you clues as to when I include the class log slide, it's the end of the class. That's up to where you have to do. Then the next material is the material that we're going to use in the following class. Okay. So this was the class log for last class. Then comes what we're using today. And then comes this class log, which will be for this class, so that you know where to break up the material, okay? Sometimes I put the things in the slides a bit early because I want to have them ready, right? But you don't need to do them. But yes, Gabriela is right. When you listen to the podcast, you'll note this is a dialogue between two ladies, one who's in Canada and one who is in Australia. And the Canadian lady, Gretchen, speaks very fast, okay? Which is why I suggest here that you can slow down the audio. When you listen to an audio on YouTube, you can slow it down. You can use captions, you can read the transcript, you can do all sorts of things to make it more digestible, right? Because she does speak a bit fast, but it's, real English. It's a podcast is an interesting way of accessing material. I've listened to a lot of podcasts over the lockdown and the last year because I was having to do a lot of things with my hands. Sweeping, cooking, washing up, things that I don't usually do that much of because I'm not usually at home. But being at home and having to do these things, I needed to be able to do something while I was doing those things, because otherwise my brain was going to go to mush. And so I didn't want that to happen. So a podcast is perfect. You put it on, you listen. It's like, you know, the listening activities that you did in English class, but you don't do it to do a listening activity. You do it for fun, believe it or not, for interest. Yes, Gabriela.
It's just listening to the radio, no? To the AM radio, I mean, not to the FM radio.
Yeah, well, I don't know how used people are listening to radio. I grew up listening to the radio when I was little. My parents would have the radio on when I had breakfast and stuff like that. The difference with the podcast, I guess, is that they tend to be on particular topics. Right? So you can, you know, this one is about linguistics and language issues. And then they have individual episodes on different individual topics. So here I'm inviting you to listen to episode 54 of this podcast, which is about how people, you have to find it when you go to the link, because this one, how linguists figure out the grammar of a language. Okay, this is the one that I'm asking you to listen to. So you can read as you listen. You can just listen. You decide. It's a dialogue between these two ladies, as I say, who are two linguists, one based in Canada, one based in Australia, and then, because I'm a bit of a pain, I've put together, where is it? Here. Some questions for you to think about, okay? But it's not a quiz. Oops, that shouldn't be there. Oh, yes, because people have started answering this. Okay. So hang on, did I give you this to do, or didn't I give you this to do? No, this comes. This is from another.
It was a homework to do, an assignment for today. That's why many of us have already done it.
Okay, but I don't remember.
In fact, you wrote some comments to our answers.
Yeah, you're right. But I've used it in different classes, so I'm just okay. Well, never mind. Okay. It's good. If you've done it, we'll revise it next time. I've got so many classes that I've started these last few weeks that I get mixed up as to which I've assigned to whom. Anyway, let's move on to the task for today. Let me explain what I want you to do now. I've got something for you to work on lexical categories. So if you go to slide 24, you will see that I've set up the 4 groups for you to, 3 groups in this case, not 4, 3 groups. So you'll be in slightly larger groups, okay? So here we go. I'll put it here. These are the 3 groups. And you're going to be working with this text that appears here. And there's 3 versions of the text. There's 1, then there's 2, and there's 3. It's always the same text, but different words are highlighted or in bold. You see, in bold, depending on which group you're in. Group 1 has this one where dark and fatal and whatever are highlighted. Group 2 has, flaw, and obsession. And group 3 has that and loved and crazy. Okay? So the idea is that you have to decide what category these words that are highlighted are, whether they're nouns, verbs, adjectives, pronouns, prepositions, adverbs, determiners, conjunctions, or whether it's the to infinitive marker. Very easy, right? You know all about categories of words. Yeah? That's easy. And then the other part of this task is that once you've done that, you go to this document and you list the words in the right section. Yeah, you're all in the same document. So you will end up with the words from the different versions of the paragraph here in this column. And then here you list the characteristics of that type of word. So for example, if it's an adjective, it appears before a noun. Right? That sort of thing. There may be different characteristics depending on the examples that you talk about. So an adjective may appear before a noun, so the happy child, or it may appear after a verb. She is happy. Right? So you just have to list all the characteristics, okay? So that then later on we'll be able to compare and contrast the things that you came up with. Does that make sense? Is it kind of clear what I'm asking you to do? It's not complicated at all, okay? It's quite simple. Are there any questions as to that?
Shall we choose the groups?
You decide which group you go to. At the moment, there are, let me just check, 20 people here. So there shouldn't be more than 7 people in each group, right? Okay. So if you go to a group and there's already 7 people, go to another group, okay? I'm not going to choose the groups for you. Is that okay?
Yes.
Any other questions?
Cristina, we go to the breakout rooms and then we come back. Or...
Well, that's what I was going to say. Once you finish in your group with all the words in your paragraph, you're free to go.
Okay.
Okay. And then what I am going to ask you to do, you've done the Lingthusiasm, but for next class, I will ask you to watch the language prejudice video and the get the grammar video.
Okay. And the people who haven't done the podcast, we do all 3. So
that's
that
right.
We can catch up.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry. I don't know how that confusion came about.
It's fine. Don't worry.
So we discussed about lexical categories next week as well. This last activity, we discuss it next class.
Well, we'll discuss your answers. What we'll discuss.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. We'll talk about your. Let me just find it somewhere here. We'll talk about the things that you've written in this table.
Perfect.
Basically, is that? Yeah, is that? Are we happy with that? Any other questions?
Sorry, but
yes, go ahead.
For next class is get the grammar, the podcast, and what more? Sorry.
The language prejudice video.
Okay.
This one, there's no activity associated with it, but it's what we were talking about in terms of language prejudice. It's watching this video and reflecting on these questions, but you don't have to do an activity other than that. Is that all right? Does that sound cool? Any other questions? Okay, off you go to the breakout rooms. I'll let you in there. All right?
All right. Okay.
See you next time.
See you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
I think we can start. I'm on the cell phone, so I can't share the screen. Or... Yes. I think it's in the slides in lexical categories.